Hello and welcome to the Housing.com webinar on the changes that end users should be expecting in co-living accommodations due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Jamur Ghosh, Editor-in-Chief, Housing.com News, and my panelists today are Deepak Anand, who is the co-founder and CEO of Housr. Hi, Deepak.
Hi, how are you doing?
Uday Lakkar is the CEO and founder of CoHo. Hello, Uday.
Hey, Jumur.
Ankit Gupta is the SVP and the COO of the Frontier Business at OYO. Hi, Ankit.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. So I have to say that this time we've received some amazing questions from the audience. So thank you so much for that. Do keep the questions coming in. We will try and get as many covered as possible. So my first question to all my panelists is about where are we at in the current market scenario. We started 2020 with great projections for the co-living space. It was being touted as the breakout segment. COVID-19 has obviously changed all of that. So right now, what's happening with the co-living space? As a matter of fact, we have a couple of audience questions that I would like to embed here. So Akhila D is asking, do you see demand for co-living in this year? Won't people prefer PG where they can have the entire room to themselves? And Vikram Jain has a slightly different take on this. He says, I feel there would be a decline in students or interns opting for PG accommodation and cheap lodges. They would prefer hygienic places, therefore hostel and co-living spaces. I would like the view of our panelists on this. So what is our take on this?
Hi. So I think the current crisis, of course, has changed the customer perception and psychology. And, so will the consumer behavior change. I think there'll be initially, a general lack of trust, and, customers would want a promise of quality today. So if you ask me, co-living, the unorganized side of it, which is the PG side of it, will surely suffer, because they'll not be able to provide, standardized service, hygiene, safety. But I think the full stack players, like us and, others in the market who have large spaces and are standardized, the large players will only, stand to gain, because, they'll be able to give professional level of housekeeping, safety, security, sanitization. And I agree to your point, people would, the consumption would move from a shared accommodation, which is, twin sharing or a triple sharing room, to a private room. People may not care much about the size of the room though, but yes, the preference will move from shared to a private room.
Yeah. What about you, Ankit?
Yeah. I'd like to answer this in two parts. There is a macroeconomic view on how demand comes back irrespective of the sector, and then there is an impact on the sector itself. From a macroeconomic perspective, there are actually many things right now to worry about. The government has done a fantastic job till recently while they were containing the entire COVID situation. Because of the economic constraint, they've had to open up the market a little bit. Unfortunately, over the past few days, the results have not been encouraging. In addition, I think the entire economic rating, the possibility of the US going into a recession and so on are quite worrisome. But at least we believe that the government is taking all the right steps in the current direction to make sure that we come back and spring back both to life and livelihood as soon as possible. Coming to the microeconomic situation for the sector, all industries, I think, are impacted equally at this stage. I don't think there is a single industry which is booming. The market, we believe, is expected to come back. And we do believe that in the real estate frame, we believe that there will be a spring back of demand a lot more on the rental side versus people buying properties because of the cash flow situation. So overall, I know this is a temporary blip, but from a rental perspective of residential sector in the market, we're very bullish.
Okay. Uday, what do you think is going to happen?
Fairly in alignment with Deepak and Ankit, I would say. I think if I were to divide the overall thought process that I have at this point in time into three parts. One is, let's say, the supply side of real estate. One is the demand side coming from whether it's students, young professionals, married people, whatever, right? Third is the consumer psyche. I think Deepak mentioned about that to start off with, right? So I think on the consumer psyche front, I agree with Deepak that it's very logical to think that when I'm having a fear psychosis hanging over my head all the time, I want to like stay separate. We have had instances wherein youngsters who are normally so unhygienic, right? When you end up actually asking them put the towel somewhere else, actually be clean and all. Now they are saying that, okay, why is this there? And this, all kind of new behavior actually popping up, right? So very interesting to see that, right? Similarly for hygiene, sanitation and all, that will become the new normal, right? So I was in fact wondering that how will the movie scenes come up in the future? Just imagine in social distancing, hero, heroine are there. How are they coming together? How are they, anything? Just when you start thinking about different facets of the economy and different facets of social life, right? It's so different, right? How much you can keep on thinking, right? How will this work? How will that work? Which begets to the conclusion basically that consumption will remain. There is no doubting that consumption will go anywhere, right? It will just come back in a modified version like it always does, right? You will require to commute, right? Now Ola has talked about taxis and all with so many of these caveats and all, right? Similarly, this I was talking to somebody in PVR, he was mentioning about how they are actually talking about different seats and how within the air itself they are going to actually purify stuff and all that. Every industry is actually talking about that. I think Ankit also mentioned that it's a macro level thing. Virtually nobody is there who's not affected, right? Some might be at a larger degree, some might be at a smaller degree, but by and large, everybody is affected socially, economically, in every possible way, right? So consumption will come back. It's a matter of timing, right? Whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And I've always believed that there's a cycle. The cycle goes something like, okay, caution, over caution, thereafter indifference, thereafter, okay, screw it all, then again caution, and then again it just keeps going in waves. I've seen my own mood swings being like crazy, right? So I'm sure actually that people in their 20s and who are the consumers that we all target largely out here, they all go through that same things, right? When you start going out, you start eating and all, right? So on the consumption side, we are very, very bullish that consumption will come back, albeit in a different format with more caveats, with more private room demand, with more hygiene sanitation as a new normal. And on the demand side, what you say, I think with work from home and companies actually talking about a fraction of the population at least working from home, right? Today we are sitting in all our homes. Prior to this session starting, we were discussing, right, that how many of you are opening offices and by which date you are opening offices and all, right? So that's a good pulse to get a sense, right? That it's a choice today. That okay, we are working, everybody is working, and it's a choice that okay, you can choose to postpone by 1 week, 10 days, 1 month, 2 months. You can say that a fragment of my audience will work from home, and so on and so forth, right? With that reality being there, we feel that, and coupled with the fact that what Ankit said, that a lot of industries have been hit, most of the industries have been hit economically. Cost cutting, cost optimization will be the flavor of the discussion, right? Over the next year and a half, 2 years, right? So within that, this fits into the scheme of things, right? You can imagine that, okay, there are large setups and all organized players, whether it's these companies which are there, CoHo and Housr and OYO or any of the players and all, right? For that matter, or even local player for that matter, to my mind, right? Everybody will try to modify their own offerings to that extent, right? To whatever different levels and all that to cater to that work from home kind of a sentiment also possibly, right? Because people gravitate towards opportunity. And on the supply side, which is the third dimension, right? On the supply side, we believe that I think again, Deepak mentioned, or Ankit, I'm forgetting, but somebody mentioned that, see, whenever there's fear psychosis, people postpone any kind of purchase decision making, right? Whether it is automobile, whether it is houses, whether it's anything for that matter. I will postpone when my job security is not certain, when I don't want to incur really a mortgage, right? I want to play safe. Within that environment, rental as a product tends to, in anything for that matter, not just our industry, in anything, tends to be slightly more prominent, right? So within that, we feel that house buying might take slightly a bit of a hit, and house renting for the time being, at least for the year and a half and all, right, might be actually having a bit of an upswing more than the tailwind that it was already having earlier rental market, right? So we feel that on the supply side, there might be more real estate alternate usage. On the demand side, we feel that there'll be slightly more demand because office spaces demand will be absorbed a bit by this segment, which will modify its offering. And on the consumer will be there, but the consumption will be in a slightly modified, slightly more cautious form, right? And maybe the branded players, maybe the local players, maybe all of them together might actually modify their offering somewhat. That's the sense that I get, at least.
Okay, so I'm going to make a connection here. You've spoken about work from home, and it's interesting because we have received an audience question on this. So Viraj Nirajkar, he is asking, and he's also expressed an opinion. He believes, that because of work from home, the co-living segment is possibly going to get impacted, because he says that with all of this cost cutting and, people shutting down offices, people working from home, he believes, that a lot of the younger, the workforce, they may not want to move to other cities to work. They might just want to, work from the comfort of their home. So, Deepak, I'd like to start with you first. What impact do you think work from home is going to have on the co-living space?
Jumur, I think we looking at it as an opportunity instead. When you say work from home, as Uday also mentioned, the current product offering obviously will be modified, right? Your own, individual room where you're staying today will be, work from home compliant going forward, right? Instead of more common areas, you'll have, a study desk and, more, faster Wi-Fi, fully automated system, in the spaces where you stay. So, we're hopeful that, people who migrant, into the city might not be able to continue working from home, staying in their own, particular city. Let's say, someone is from Jaipur, may not be able to work from Jaipur if he's working for a corporate in Gurgaon. He'll have to be physically present here, because work from home, also means that, there'll be days of the week where you'll be required to go to the office. So you need to be in the proximity.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it will not affect the demand, adversely. The only thing that I see now is that, earlier our consumption largely and the acquisition was B2C, right? And referrals. I think referrals are here to stay, but instead of B2C, I see a lot of demand, coming from B2B. The corporate houses reaching out to players like us, right? To ensure safety of their employees, to ensure, they're more and more worried today on the hygiene, and the standard of living of their employees, given the entire situation. So I think the consumption pattern, or the demand side, right, will change. We'll have to make our spaces work from home compliant, right? So I think overall, it'll not have a negative impact at all on the occupancy. We'll have to wait to see if it does have, the positive impact that I'm talking about.
Okay. What about you, Ankit?
Yeah. I think it is imperative for us to wait and watch on how the work from home culture evolves, right? At least we believe that it could be a mix of work from home and office, rather than a pure binary model where people are working either from home or from office. It's a conjunction. And in that context, making sure that we understand our customers' requirements is of utmost prudence. For us, we believe that those customers who earlier were a lot more comfortable staying and adjusting will now have much higher standards of safety, hygiene, cleanliness, and so on, including a home environment where they can also work, but they're not restricted to work there only, because there is a human psychology that requires people to interact at some frequency. And we believe that at some point is essential for the economy and for social life to move on. Our entire effort as a trusted brand on both the co-living and the student housing side is to make sure that we understand that customer requirement and make sure that we bring that available. So, for example, we have launched a zero-touch policy, which basically makes sure that the way customers are mobile in our properties, the way they are interacting with others in our properties, we are creating SOPs and modifying even the cleaning standards with different kind of disinfectants, so that the hygiene levels go up dramatically. For us, at this time, making sure that the customer satisfaction is the highest is of prime importance.
You know what? This also leads us to the question about, rents. So, a lot of our audience members, Sunaina, Rahul, Sahil, they have a very pertinent question here. They're asking that, all of these, is this going to translate into more tariff per bed? Will there be an upward revision of rentals? So can you please give us some clarity? Deepak, what do you think?
I think for the consumer, by and large, the rentals would remain unaffected. I don't see them going up or, drastically down for that matter. It's just that, someone who was staying in an unorganized PG today will have to make a choice, between paying, 20-30% extra over, choosing a place, which does not have, proper hygiene standards or safety, or, the virtual community that we're talking about now. So to your question, I think the rentals should remain unchanged in the foreseeable future, at least the next couple of months.
Yeah. What about you, Uday? What do you think? Will there be any kind of impact on rentals, right, because of all these changes?
In the short term, there will be a downward blip, I think, because of the fact that occupancy will. This is fear psychology is a big thing in the markets, right? Whether it's the financial services market or whether it is any commodity market or anything for that matter, right? So I think in the short term, when the occupancies are more and the supply created is there, so I think there's always a downward pressure in the short term. And I think in the medium term, let's say after 3 months, 4 months, not even call it medium term, but let's say immediately after the right now, immediate term and all right, thereafter people start appreciating the value of a quality product under the current circumstances, and there'll be an upward trend on the pricing, clearly, right? I mean, there's no doubting that fact, right? See, just think about Uber, right? Initially, of course, people actually hesitate to actually pick up a good service, right? Thereafter, when we all got accustomed to it, the prices go up because you start valuing the service to the new normal, right? I think that's our view.
Yeah. Ankit, is that what you think is going to happen? Because this has been a question which has been shared with us by several audience members. So I suspect, there is possibly a concern or a fear or, some kind of a thought process that this is inevitably going to happen. So do you think it's going to happen?
So our purpose is to make sure that we offer fantastic customer service and trust to our guests who stay with us at market prevalent rates. I don't think we are here to unnecessarily charge a premium or give a discount which is over and above what the market can bear.
Yeah.
I think it is anybody's guess at this stage to try and predict how the prices will move. If there is an impact on an individual's capability to pay, I think it is wise for the industry to absorb some of that and take it into account. The impact of that will therefore mean that we'll have to relook at our cost structures, including our lease rentals, because it will just have to be absorbed by the entire ecosystem. What we're definitely sure of is that offering great service as a differentiator in this situation while being competitive with market rates is something that is here to stay.
Okay. It's interesting you speak about, the overall business scenario, because we've had a lot of questions asking about how will the business model evolve going forward. As a matter of fact, Vikas Gupta, he asks us this question. He takes it one step forward. He's also asking if there have been any regulations, that the government has come up with for this sector. So what clarity can we give to our audience? Deepak, let's start with you.
I think the business model will change, as Ankit also mentioned. We'll have to, look at the new lease agreements, with a very, very tight lens, and figure out, that the lease commitments which were earlier being made, now will have to, the occupancy risk will now have to be shared, between the operator and, the owner of the property. So I think to that effect, the transaction or the nature of transaction, is sure to be modified in the short term at least. Every industry, going forward will see a new normal. Ours will be no different. But I think the entire focus is going to change, right? From delivering kind of product which is needed in the market now. So long as you have the right kind of product, I think, the occupancy and everything should not be a challenge. Also, we focus now on value-added services that one can provide. Customer will be able to, or will be willing, to shell out extra, provided you can, reclassify the product and, provide the kind of services and, the best, which is the need we are today. There will be some residents, who would maybe see a pay cut, in their organizations, which leads to a drop in occupancy, which is also a short-term thing, or, people might lose their jobs. But, that number, what we've assessed till now has been, minuscule. If you look at, the audience that we cater to the entire TG, that effect is going to be in the range of about 10-20% initially. But, as Uday said, this is immediate term, and in the short term, things will come back to normal.
Yeah. Uday, how do you think this business model is now going to evolve? What changes do you foresee in the way people will now, put their business models in place?
Number one, there'll be a lot of partnerships throughout the value chain, right? We have actually been working on a partnership and risk sharing model for the last several years. So we are already on that model, but I think the industry will shift to that new model wherein risk participation throughout the value chain will be there, right? Whether it's on the customer side, whether it's enterprises actually coming as customers, whether it's the developers, real estate owners, anybody for that matter. That's one pattern. Second is clearly quality, hygiene, sanitation, or whatever you call it, the safety perception, that entire package, which was being propagated earlier as a good to have, now becomes a must have. Sure. And when that happens, then automatically people factor that in the pricing. Just think of multiplex industry, right? I used to invest in multiplexes back 10 years back, right? So I remember that at that time, a lot of the multiplexes were new and there was slightly more novel, kids fancy and all that, right? Then you used to compare with single screen cinemas, right? But then slowly people start thinking that, okay, it's significantly better than that, right? So similarly out here also, right now, the initial years of the industry, see, we have been at this business for last half a decade now, right? So having the advantage of hindsight, when we never used to call this business even co-living, we started this back in 2015, calling this as long stay managed residential or managed rental accommodations. In fact, I'm back to that name again, right? Instead of calling it co-living, I'm back to that name, right? It's managed residences and all for youngsters or for young married couples or whatever that might be, students, right? So I think the industry will start, or the consumer side will start actually appreciating this as a must-have rather than a good to have. And I think we should all be cognizant of including even the unorganized players out there. All said and done, all the organized players put together are not even 5% of the industry at best, right? To my mind, pan-India if you take. So we are a very, very small fragment of the entire industry. And if I were to take a slightly more disjoint view, taking myself out of CoHo and just thinking of the view, I think the necessity is at a much higher level, right? In terms of hygiene, sanitation, in terms of social distancing, in terms of the entire mean actually for the industry as a whole, right? Of which we all players are a very small part, right? So I think whether it's regulations from the government, whether it is hygiene standards, whether it is distancing norms or whatever that might be, those things have to be percolated down at an industry level, and that can happen top down quite often, right? From the government, from the regulatory authorities, and which is fine. I think it's a time to upgrade for everybody for the better good. Why not? That's our view.
What about you, Ankit?
Yeah, I think there are 4 parts to the business model which we think will change quite disruptively. The first one is the consumer or the guests who come and stay with us. And as you can see, for us, that's I repeat that so much that it shows how important that is in our context. From that perspective, we are investing heavily in trying to, even more than before, understand what the customer's needs and requirements are, beyond even hygiene and a better quality and safety, because that sort of becomes table stakes at this stage. In fact, including creating different customer segments, thinking about how tech enablement can happen, building infrastructure, etc. for us has now become even more important than earlier was, number one. The second is on the operations and services side. I think it has been stated before, quality, hygiene, but in addition to that, also making sure that we are being flexible to our customers on areas that currently are pinching them, for example, on payments. We've now launched a few schemes, for example, delaying our security deposits. We are enabling more credit mechanisms to ensure that our customers are happy and safe while staying with us versus worrying about how do we pay our rent. The third one is on the point of happiness. We believe in one core thing, that even more than corona being infectious, one particular aspect which is infectious is happiness and joy. If we are able to spread happiness and joy in our properties, then I think that's a fantastic way for people to stay with us. As we speak, we have many residents in our properties today who are part of essential services, who are helping the needy out there, and we celebrate them. We ensure that we are supporting them and we celebrate the cause, and that is what we're here for. So that third aspect of just making sure that we spread happiness and joy in various ways is something that I think is going to be quite a disruption. The final fourth thing is on the cost structure, like I mentioned, on the lease rentals. I don't think that the earlier model of long fixed leases can now continue going forward. Various other industries have, over the past 10 years or so, adapted to a more revenue share model. I think in this industry, it's now time for us to realize that both shifting to a revenue share, plus for people who understand real estate deeply, there is a concept called residential yield or commercial yield in the commercial sector. Understanding the residential or the commercial yield that is supposed to be given, and bringing your lease structures in line with those versus abnormal lease structures just because there is a funding ability for other organized players is, I think, going to become the core business model going forward.
There was another aspect of the question, which our audience member had, and that was about, if there have been any regulations announced, by the government. Could we maybe just briefly touch upon that, or do we feel that there is maybe need for, intervention of some sort from the government? You are all market leaders in your own right. So what's your take on that, Deepak? I think Deepak didn't get that. Uday, would you perhaps like to, take up that answer?
Sure. So essentially, the industry largely falls into the ambit of what we call as residential dwelling. That's the predominant nature, right? Now, within that, there are nuances, right? Whether GST as a levy should be applicable or not, right? Or whether a residential building should be used, or whether there should be a commercial asset that should be used, right? Like any industry which grows, right? For example, take Uber. Still, the dispute remains that whether it's a taxi company or whether it's a tech company. For Amazon versus Walmart, the fight still goes on. Actually, what kind of exemptions are given and whatnot. Airbnb is still confusing that whether it's a rental company, home rental company, or hotel company, and all, right? So several industries like these, which grow out of need, right? So I think it's more of a top-down decision making by the government, right? So essentially, we feel that it's a necessity, right? So if there are so many people who are migrants, either in tier 1 cities or tier 2 cities, who are working in a certain format, who require this service, that's why this industry is there for a long period. So this industry has been there for more than 30, 40 years now. These organized players are just a new entrant to this entire industry, to my mind, right? So I think the need was there, and if there is more and more organization that is happening around, government takes notice of that always, right? And then decides to classify, club it into different buckets and all. Right now, we are in the transitory phase wherein those regulations are being talked about, being discussed upon, some rulings coming from here and there, and that's the phase which is there. But we are reasonably confident given the necessary nature of this entire service itself, right? Whatever the government or the authorities decide, most of the players, be it the local ones or be it so-called the branded ones, everybody will comply with that, right?
Okay. Ankit, is there something you'd like to add?
First of all, I think the government has already been very, very supportive in helping bring together this organized community. In addition to that, we have as a co-living association a few asks which we are in conversations with the government. For example, on what Uday mentioned regarding the aspect of, are we a residential tagged industry or are we a commercial tagged industry? It has implications on various things, including electricity, including taxation, etc. I think those are conversations going on. I'm sure the government will be supportive of our requests, and we will at least through that come, if not close, but at least better than where we are today as compared to the unorganized market.
Okay. We're getting a lot of questions as expected, around sanitization issues, hygiene issues. So before I move to that segment, there's one question, that Abhishek Jain is asking, and he's asking about what will be the new normal occupancy rates. He asks that earlier it was 80%. So now going forward, are we expecting it to be at 60% or even 50%? What can we tell, Abhishek? Deepak?
Yeah, I think as we discussed earlier also, I think in the immediate term, you could see a drop in occupancy, which is, the first 2-3 months, whenever we open up, owing to a lot of factors as we discussed earlier as well. People may want to move out. There'll be people who will not be returning because they've lost their jobs. People have faced, steep salary cuts. In few instances, they'll have to figure out an alternate way to, stay in the city. So I think all of this will come to the play for the first 2-3 months when we open up. But I think in the medium term to long term, obviously the occupancies will return to normal. If the industry was operating at 80-85% earlier, I think it will be back, to 80-90% again. Because, now the need for people to look out for spaces which, provide a commitment on, hygiene, safety, a lot of things which are tech enabled, no contact, food delivery, etc., will only go up. So, I think another 3 to 4 months will decide, where the occupancy levels will go. Do we need more properties in a particular area, or, despite all our wishful thinking, does not, come back to the earlier levels, which is, 80-90% and, stays at 60-70.
Yeah.
But if you ask my personal opinion, I think by the end of this year, you'll see the occupancy levels, coming back to where they were earlier.
Okay. What about you, Uday? You have a number in mind?
No, why not actually? I'm just saying it's a redundant thought, right? In the immediate term, anything for that matter, whether it's food, taxi or anything goes down. And thereafter, even more so, it will come back to 95%. Why even 80-85%? That's my view, right? Because if there is a requirement of a service, see, either the service will exist or it will not exist. If it exists, it will exist very, very strongly. And with a pricing premium also, with a very high occupancy also. It's a matter of who delivers quality and consistently does that, right? And it's as simple as that. I think it will be even higher.
What about you, Ankit? Any thoughts?
Yeah. As an industry, and I'm not talking about organized versus unorganized here, as a total umbrella industry, the occupancy obviously has taken a hit. And we believe that as the economy comes back with the support of the government and other industries picking up, the economy will help bring the occupancy back to where it originally was in the same as the same curve.
Okay.
Having said that, I wanted to share a few facts. This industry is even if I take the top 8 to 10 cities in India, we have about 55 lakh people who migrate and come to work in these cities. Out of those 55 lakh people, 35 to 40 lakh people need rental accommodation, right? And are in that age bracket where they require a PG or a co-living accommodation. Today, the organized sector of co-living does not capture even 5% of this particular demand, not even 5%. The opportunity is huge. Even if we take student housing, frankly, student housing is, as an industry, not able to capture more than 30% of the demand out there. I think, like someone mentioned, it's a bit of a redundant thought, because yes, as an industry, there may be a worry, but there's a phrase: when the going gets tough, get going. The people and the companies who are able to ensure that the business model is fixed, that they can maximize customer satisfaction, the market is huge for us to capture and operate in.
You know what? I'll move to all the questions about safety and hygiene, because that has been a major bulk of questions for us. So I will start with Gaurav Joshi's question, where he is asking that how can I know that my co-living provider, he is maintaining safety and hygiene standards. So can we give some kind of a checklist for our audience, that wherever they might be staying in a co-living, what should they be watching out for? What can they expect in the current scenario?
I think a lot of it, the entire discussion, with our teams and our residents and, taking the feedback for the last about more than 30 days has, only been around safety, hygiene, sanitization, what new steps, are we taking?
Yeah.
I think, and, it may differ from player to player, but I think as an industry, a lot of it, if you talk about, let's say the housekeeping only, we've always partnered with, professional housekeeping, players who have, very strong SOPs, and, they adhere to it on a day-to-day basis. Multiple, sanitization routines, no contact cleaning is what is happening, more and more tech coming into the play, right? Changing the entire, F&B service, from dining together as a community, which was, a good thing to have earlier. But, now completely moving to, eating in your own silos, at least for the foreseeable future, in the next couple of months. What we've also been, talking to our residents and taking their feedback, when they order, let's say, food from outside or, anything, the groceries and all, we've been encouraging them to avoid, the CODs, which is the cash on delivery, so that there is minimum interaction, between the delivery boy and the resident, and, they're happily complying as well. I think social distancing also, within the properties, restricting, the usage of, the common areas, amenities, lounge, gym, from free for all earlier to, 2, 3, 4 people at a time, depending on how big your facility is. Sanitizers have been placed, all across in the property at, various touch points. People are being monitored and, they're happily complying, so the kind of TG that we cater to, most of them in their 20s, aware, educated. I think they're also very happy to comply. It's not that, we're facing any resistance from our residents, In fact, you get a suggestion or two more than, what you've been thinking or, deliberating within yourself, or with your team when you go and, talk to the residents. So I think a lot of it, and, I can carry on, another 10, 15, 20 things that, we doing, I'm sure, if you go across, you'll have, at least a dozen more, steps that are being followed today.
Yeah. Uday, what suggestions do we have for Gaurav Joshi, who's asking how can he ascertain, that my co-living provider is doing what he's supposed to do?
My view is this: it has to come from within, right? Forget about co-living player, forget about your food vendors or anything for that matter, right? So as I said, I go back to my cycle: caution, over caution, indifference, frustration, screw it, again caution, and so on and so forth. That's all of us, right? And that same behavior will keep reflecting itself in every space, right? And I think the reflection that how people behave within a co-living setup or within a PG or within an apartment or everywhere, right? So I think Rohit from Oyo was mentioning on Facebook. I saw that RWS ke prati will be a bit more what do you say, respectful towards RWS. They're doing a tough job, right? I was just seeing his Facebook post and all that, right? So that's true. It means why is it the need to call out somebody else that okay, be respectful towards RWS? Simply because everybody has an opinion of their own, right? And though it looks very nice, right? Initially, people want to be very cautious, and we'll have all those rules, regulations, and everything in place. But there is a boredom, right? There's boredom that kicks in. As I said, that same cycle I'll keep coming back to, right? Because I've seen myself going through that same cycle. and so does everybody else that I see, at least in my resident network out here, right? So it will boil down to how indifferent people become or how cautious people become to the new normal. Will be just a reflection of that. Although the organized players or whatever will have all the cautions in place. For example, in our properties, we are saying that, okay, how you can distance when somebody is going to take water from an RO, or in the food queue, if somebody sneezes, then there might be a thing. Can you make a food mask compulsory while somebody is picking up food from the buffet? Or actually how you can separate, say, have some separators among that. When you are playing a pool, can you have gloves for the pool stick? You can think of umpteen number of things. But finally, everything boils down to how does the individual respond to the environment around it, whether it's sitting in a taxi or in a restaurant or in an office space or anywhere else for that matter, right? And then these are other enablers which all of us will do, frankly, right? Okay. And the organized ones will do better than the other ones, that's for sure.
Yeah. So Ankit, what do you think the enablers should be doing? We have time for just one more question. So my last question will be about what can we as individuals do. But before that, I want to hear your take on what should a co-living company, what should an operator be doing? What's their job in this scenario?
Yeah. By the way, this is a topic which can go on for hours in the current environment.
That's why I clarified that we have time for just one more question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as CoHo, not just as the brands within Frontier that I am privileged to lead, but as an overall CoHo institution right now, we are investing extremely heavily in the SOPs and the thought process on how to make our properties across the board safe. We've implemented a zero-touch policy. A few elements of that, it is actually a fairly long SOP, but a few elements of that I would like to share are, it includes using disinfectants which are now with brands and with chemicals which are much of superior quality than ever before. There are SOPs around how people use common areas, timings on access to either the food place or these common areas. I mentioned SOPs on PPE kits, using masks, SOPs on interactions, even delivery, and so on and so forth. So there's a fairly long list. Having said that, this is not easy. And I think it will require collaboration of all those who stay in the property to come together to treat the property as their own, versus saying this is the job of either the person who's looking after the property or that individual company. Sure. So that is my only request from everyone. We are, by the way, more than open to all suggestions from our guests who stay with us to give us even more ideas beyond what you've given us over the past 3-4 weeks as we've interacted with you. Yes, I'm sure we will, if we come together, we will be able to defeat this COVID situation quickly.
So what would you require? So this is my last question. What should they be doing to keep themselves and the people around them safe? If you could just very quickly, all three of us could just give our co-living residents a few tips. How should they keep themselves safe?
Yeah, I think while we can keep talking about the SOPs that we follow and the hygiene measures and all, I think it can be one only collectively, which is when the residents also take responsibility and maturity. That's going to be very important. We as players will need to conduct regular training workshops. I think from time to time, given the entire regulatory framework also around the entire hygiene and the protocols. I think we've been very lucky that we've been observing our residents being fully aware and taking all the steps, be it wearing a mask while they step out to buy essentials and groceries, or be it sanitizing their hands while moving out, while coming back, or be not pressing the lift button with their fingers, using their elbow. Few of them are coming up with very innovative techniques, like using a toothpick to press the lift button as well. And you'll see more and more of these innovations coming out soon. they're also complying when we say, they're not taking an offense when we say that they'll be screened for temperature. There'll be a temperature screening every time, that they come back from outside, within the property. I think they're fully complying. No one's taking it on their ego. I think, it has to work in tandem. We can not dictate, the do's and don'ts. Because they're all, mature individuals. We can follow our own SOPs and, they have to comply as well, and they know. And this is happening. And, if we continue to do what we're doing, unless, it gets into a stage, as Uday said, when I don't care about something, I think that's a little far. That stage is not going to come in the next 30 or 60 days. So collective efforts are ensuring that things go in the right direction.
Yeah. Uday, do you have any tips for us?
No, I'm hardly anybody to give tips, but yeah, I think two things are very, very important. In general, I've always felt one is acceptance, right? Yeah. So I don't look at my consumer as any different from anybody else on the street, right? Yeah. So essentially, it's a millennial, it's a young person, right? By and large, it's a young person. I think acceptance of the new normal, whether it is in the offices, whether it's at a theater, whether it's in a car, whether it's in a co-living space or whatever. I think acceptance of the new normal is going to be the single biggest factor. As I have always believed, and whatever little I have seen in my career, I think it's great to have SOPs, great to have processes and everything. At a country level also, we have so many of them, right? But adherence to that is the key, right? So it's a discipline that distinguishes, right, how we behave. And second is compassion. I think I do genuinely believe in that cycle of frustration and everything as such that people go through, right? All of us, right? Whether we acknowledge it on webinars or TV or not, that's a different issue. But all of us do go through that. And it is in that small fraction of that 5%, 10% when we start thinking, okay, let me not care for it. That's when the mistake happens. Yeah. And that's when you actually start exposing the entire ecosystem to a much larger risk. And that's where I think the blame game starts and everything. So I think we have all seen across societies and everything, right, how that problem is happening. So compassion is the second thing, which I keep telling my own team as well as everybody, right? Be compassionate to a security guard, to a housekeeper, to your fellow residents, to your everybody to everybody, right? It's a tough time and it's not a short haul. It's a long haul. In the short haul, you can always dictate, okay, do this, don't do that. For a small period of time in a flight, you can say 2 hours, you behave like this. Just make that 2 hours into 200 hours. Let's see how people behave. Right? It's a very different behavioral pattern that emerges, right? Yeah. So I think it's in a long haul, compassion helps and acceptance of the new normal helps. So these are the only two thoughts that I keep telling myself.
Ankit, any last words?
I think a lot of the points mentioned by both Deepak and Uday are totally valid. I won't add to that list of actions. I have one mindset request from everyone, which is if everyone can just continue treating the properties where they stay as their own home and treat the people staying in that property and the people who are managing that property as their family and equally respect their safety as one's own safety. I think a lot of the points that have been discussed will automatically start getting implemented because the points are very well known.
Yeah, very true. Thank you so much. This was a lovely discussion. That's all that we have time for today. Thank you, my audience. We will see you again tomorrow. Till then, stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.